Picture this, it's 1943, and you're a soldier crouched in a muddy foxhole, the distant rumble of artillery shaking the ground. Your uniform's damp, your boots are caked with grime, and your stomach's growling louder than the tanks rolling by. Amid the chaos of World War II tanks, trenches and total war, there's a question we rarely ask. What did you eat to keep going? Tonight, we're diving into the gritty, sometimes grim world of soldiers' rations, peeling back history, one tin of corned beef at a time. So dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft, soothing hum and settle in. Let's journey together into a world where food was more than fuel. It was survival morale and sometimes a cruel joke. First things first, let's get you in the mood. If you're enjoying this dive into history, give a nod with a like, subscribe. If you're hooked, and drop a comment to tell me where you're tuning in from. New York at midnight, Sydney at dawn. It's wild to think we're all connected through these stories. Now back to the battlefield. When we think of World War II, we picture heroic soldiers storming beaches, pilots dogfighting in the skies. But before a single bullet flew, every army faced a less glamorous fight, feeding millions of men across continents without poisoning them or crushing their spirits. It wasn't just about filling bellies. It was a logistical nightmare, a balancing act of science, cost and hope. Imagine you're a general plotting strategy in a war room. Your troops are scattered from frozen Russian steppes to sweltering Pacific jungles. You need food that's cheap, portable, and won't turn to mush in a backpack or rot in a crate. Oh, and it should probably not taste like despair, though that's negotiable. Flavour a distant dream somewhere behind won't give you dysentery and rats won't steal it. Armies didn't just fight enemies, they fought hunger spoilage and the sinking morale of men staring at another can of mystery meat. This wasn't cooking, it was war on a plate. Each nation tackled this differently and we'll explore them all. The Americans packed their optimism into little cardboard boxes called K-rations, promising nutrition with a side of existential dread. The Germans started strong with sausages and rye, then slid into cans of what might have been punishment. The British clung to tea like it was the glue of the empire, and honestly it probably was. Soviets boiled cabbage into submission, and the Japanese. They marched on rice balls, willpower, and not much else. Food shaped more than strength, it shaped spirit. A hot meal could make you feel human again. A cold, greasy tin could make you question why you enlisted. So tonight we're not chasing battles or borders. We're chasing the stories of spam crackers and powdered eggs, the real war fought in mess kits and foxholes. Because if there's one truth about war, it's this: everyone's got to eat, even if the food fights back. Stick with me, and let's uncover what kept soldiers going, one reluctant bite at a time. You're a soldier in 1944, trudging through a French forest, your rifle heavy on your shoulder, your stomach muttering mutiny. The last meal you had was a cracker that tasted like cardboard and regret, and you're wondering if dinner will be any better. Feeding you and millions like you during World War II wasn't just a task, it was a high-stakes puzzle, where failure meant more than an empty plate. Let's pull back the curtain on the chaos of wartime rations, where logistics, survival, and a touch of absurdity collided. Picture the challenge: you've got armies sprawled across Europe, Asia, and the Pacific. Supply lines stretch thousands of miles, dodging U-boats, blizzards, and bombs. Your food has to survive the journey cramped in a ship's hold, baked in desert heat, or frozen in Siberian snow. It needs to be lightweight so you can carry it through mud or jungle, and it better not spoil because there's no fridge in a foxhole. Cost matters too. Feeding millions on a budget means no gourmet steaks. And here's the kicker: it's got to keep you alive, preferably without making you wish you weren't. The science of rations was ruthless. Armies needed calories, lots of them packed into the smallest, sturdiest form. Protein, fats, sugar check. Vitamins to fend off scurvy, sure, but taste. That was a luxury like silk socks or a warm bed. Rations were designed to be good enough to keep you marching, not enough to make you smile. The US tried to engineer their way out, stuffing K-rations with processed precision. Germans leaned on hearty staples until supplies ran thin. The British brewed tea to mask the monotony, while Soviets made cabbage a lifestyle. Japanese soldiers were told to make do with less, and somehow they did. But food wasn't just about staying upright. It was about keeping your head in the game. A hot stew could remind you of a home, lift your spirits, make you feel like you might see tomorrow. A tin of slimy meat could sink you into despair, make you trade your last cigarette for a bite of something else, anything else. Soldiers bartered like marketplace hagglers, chocolate for gum crackers for a story. In foxholes you'd hear snores, curses and the clink of a canteen. But nothing bonded men like sharing a rare Hershey bar or cursing the same awful beans. This was the real war behind the war, a battle against hunger boredom, and the creeping fear that tomorrow's meal might be worse. As we move forward, we'll dig into the specifics, starting with America's K-rations, a cardboard miracle that fueled a global fight one questionable bite at a time. Stay with me. The menu's about to get weird. You're a US soldier in 1944 slumped against a crumbling wall in an Italian village. You've marched 10 miles through rain that feels personal, dodged bullets that weren't and haven't seen a hot shower since you left basic training. Your stomach's howling like a stray dog, and you reach into your pack for salvation, a K-ration. It's a small cardboard box about the size of a paperback, but it feels like it's mocking you. Welcome to America's attempt to feed you in World War II, a nutritional marvel wrapped in disappointment, designed by folks who clearly never tasted it themselves. Let's crack open this K-ration and see what Uncle Sam's serving. You get 3 boxes a day, breakfast, lunch and dinner, each one a compact calorie bomb meant to keep you alive if not happy. Breakfast starts bold with a can of ham and eggs, which sounds cosy until you open it. It's a greenish sludge, less ham than mystery, with a texture like wet cement. You scoop it with a knife, because spoons are for civilians, and pair it with biscuits so hard they could chip a tooth. There's instant coffee that tastes like burnt regret powdered lemonade that's more chemical than citrus, and a couple of gum sticks to distract you from the sadness. Oh, and 4 cigarettes, because nothing says balanced diet like a Marlboro Chaser. Best of all, 1 square of toilet paper. 1. Choose wisely. Lunch doesn't lift your spirits. You might get a cheese spread that's more science than dairy oozing from a can like it's plotting escape. More biscuits, because apparently the army hates your jaw, and a chocolate bar so dense it could stop a bullet. You hack at it with your bayonet, wondering if it's food or fortification. Dinner's the finale meat and beans, a can that looks like it lost a fight. The contents slosh suspiciously, tasting like someone described savoury to a chemist. More biscuits, more gum, and if the stars align, a fruit bar that hints at apple, in the way a shadow hints at light. It's not a meal, it's a test of will. But here's the thing, K-rations were genius in their own grim way. They packed 3,000 calories a day, enough to keep you swinging a rifle or hauling a pack. Protein, fat, sugar, they hit the marks with just enough flavour to remind you what you're missing. Soldiers turned it into a game, trading like Wall Street brokers. Cigarettes for chocolate, cheese for anything else, because that ham and eggs. Nobody wanted seconds. Every now and then you'd find a Hershey bar, real chocolate, not the D-ration brick we'll talk about next. For one bite you're not in a foxhole, you're back home mum's pie on the table. That moment made the rest bearable. K-rations were dry, weird, and tasted like war itself, but they fueled the fight across continents. They weren't gourmet, they were grit, and they got the job done. Stick around as we dig into the D-ration next, where chocolate becomes a survival threat. You're stranded behind enemy lines 1943, somewhere in the Pacific, with nothing but your rifle, a fading map and a D-ration in your pocket. It looks like a chocolate bar wrapped in shiny foil, promising a sweet escape from the jungle's damp misery. But don't be fooled, this isn't your corner store Hershey's. The D-ration is a cruel prank disguised as dessert engineered by the US Army to keep you alive while testing your sanity. Let's unwrap this edible punishment and see why soldiers cursed its name. The D-ration was born from necessity. The army needed an emergency food that wouldn't melt in tropical heat, wouldn't crumble in Arctic cold, and could sit in a pack for years without turning to dust. Oh, and it had to be so unappealing you'd only eat it when starvation knocked. Mission accomplished. This chocolate bar about the size of a deck of cards was denser than a brick and harder than your sergeant's glare. Bite it cold, and you risked a trip to the dentist. Ingredients: chocolate, sugar, oat, flour, cocoa fat. Sounds fine, right? Wrong. It tasted like despair baked into a slab with a gritty aftertaste that lingered like bad news. Why so awful? The army worked with Hershey's to make it deliberately unpalatable. They didn't want you snacking on your last resort. It had to survive deserts, tundras, and the chaos of war, so they packed it with 600 calories of pure endurance. You could grate it into hot water for a sad cocoa if you had water and fire. Some guys tried softening it in their mouth. Others just stared at it, wondering if it was food or a weapon. Legend has it soldiers used it to hammer tent stakes or shore up foxholes. If a bullet hit your pack, the D-ration might have saved your life by stopping it. Soldiers loathed it, and for good reason. Eating a D-ration felt like chewing regret. In a foxhole with hunger clawing at your gut, you'd force it down knowing it'd keep you moving another day. But emotionally, it was a gut punch. You'd dream of mum's brownies, not this brown block of misery. The army eventually got the hint tweaking later versions to be less like masonry, but the damage was done. Veterans swapped stories of D-rations like they were war wounds, half joking, half traumatised. The D-ration wasn't just food. It was a lesson in survival. It proved you could endure anything, bullets, mud, even chocolate that fought back. Next, we'll roll into field kitchens where soldiers chase something warm edible, and maybe just maybe worth eating. You're a US soldier in 1944 hunched under a dripping tarp in the Ardennes, the cold seeping through your sodden wool coat like a personal grudge. Your K-ration biscuits are gone. Your D-ration's a last resort, and your stomach's staging a full-scale revolt. Then through the mist you catch a whiff. Grease onions, maybe hope. It's the field kitchen, a rattling, smoke-belching miracle on wheels rolling in to serve something warm, recognisable, and only slightly soul-crushing. Let's pull up a mess kit and see what's cooking in the chaotic heart of wartime dining. Field kitchens, or rolling misery carts as some grunts called them, were the army's attempt to bring hot food to the front. Picture a truck or horse-drawn wagon hauling vats big enough to bathe in sloshing with stew beans, or a gravy-like substance that defied naming. These mobile messes churned out meals in the middle of nowhere, rain-soaked fields, bombed-out villages, or jungles thick with mosquitoes. It wasn't fine dining, it was survival with a side of steam. You'd shuffle up mess kit in hand, a metal tray that felt more like a science experiment than a plate, praying the guy ahead didn't hog the last scoop of something vaguely meaty. The menu depended on where you were. In Europe you might get Essos creamed chipped beef on toasted dish, so infamous soldiers swore the name stood for something far ruder than stuff on a shingle. It was salty gluey and looked like it had lost a fight with a can opener, but it was hot and that made it king. In the Pacific you'd be lucky for rice and hot dog scraps swimming in broth so thin it whispered apologies. Coffee, though, was the real hero. Black bitter brewed in quantities that could wake a coma patient. You drank it hot, cold, or gritty, clutching your tin cup like it held the meaning of life. It kept you angry, awake, and alive. The smell of a field kitchen was a beacon cutting through the stench of mud and gunpowder. You'd trudge through snow or slop just to feel the steam on your face, hear the ladle clank, and trade a glare with the cook who doled out one scoop with the precision of a drill sergeant. Eating was an adventure. You sat on rocks, helmets, or the ground, balancing your tray while rain diluted your stew. No forks, no napkins, just you, your buddies, and a tin of beans older than your platoon leader. But when that food hit your stomach warm and chewy, it felt like a hug from home. Field kitchens weren't glamorous, they were gritty like the war itself. In a world of cold cans and hardtack, they offered a flicker of comfort, a reminder you weren't just surviving, you were fighting for something worth tasting. Next, we'll march into early German rations, where sausages and rye bread made war feel almost civilised for a while. It's 1940 and you're a German soldier, boots polished, marching through a French countryside that's quieter than it should be. Your pack's heavy with gear, rifle ammo, grenades, but there's something else weighing you down: food. Real food. The kind that makes you feel like a human, not a cog in Hitler's war machine. Early in World War II, German rations were the envy of armies, a spread so hearty it almost made invasion feel like a picnic. Let's unpack the Wehrmacht's lunch and see why for a brief moment you ate like a king. Your ration pack is a practical marvel built for a soldier expected to carry his own meals for a couple of days. You've got dark rye bread, dense and chewy, with a crust that smells like a baker's hearth. Slice it thin, spread on butter or marmalade from a tiny tin, and it's a taste of home, soft, in a world of sharp edges. There's sausage too, like Metwurst or Leberwurst, packed with protein, and a smoky kick that lingers like a memory. Canned meats, maybe pork or beef, sit heavy in your pack, ready to be cracked open with a bayonet. Add a wedge of cheese sharp and comforting and you're set. For a drink, there's a Satz coffee, roasted acorns or barley, not the real stuff, but it's warm and bitter enough to fool you on a cold dawn. The Germans planned for 3 hot meals a day, a lofty goal backed by field kitchens trailing like overworked food trucks. Breakfast might be bread with jam washed down with that acorn brew. Lunch could be tinned meat, a boiled potato, or cheese eaten fast between marches. Dinner, if the shells weren't flying, was a stew or soup, maybe with dumplings or sausage chunks bobbing in broth. These kitchens churned out steaming pots filling the air with smells of pork and spice that cut through the reek of sweat and steel. You'd line up mess tin ready, and for a moment the war felt far away. This wasn't just food, it was morale. A full stomach fueled the Wehrmacht's early blitzkrieg swagger, made you feel unstoppable. Veterans later swore the bread was the war's only kindness, softer than their bunks or their orders. Sausage tins, though smelly in a trench, were prize traded like gold for cigarettes or socks. But this golden age of rations was fleeting. As supply lines stretched and the war dragged on, the sausages vanished, the bread turned to dust, and you'd learn to miss these days like a lost friend. Stay with me as we explore what came next. That's rations, where Germany's culinary dreams turned into a nightmare of sawdust and lies. It's 1942 and you're a German soldier shivering in a trench somewhere on the Eastern Front, your breath fogging in the bitter air. The days of hearty rye bread and smoky sausages are a distant memory, replaced by something far grimmer: ersatz rations. The German word ersatz means substitute. But let's be real, it's a polite way of saying this isn't food, but you're eating it anyway. As Hitler's war machine stretched thin, your meals turned into a cruel experiment in culinary deception. Let's crack open the tin and see what the Reich's serving now. Your ration pack is a shadow of its former self. Coffee gone. In its place, ersatz cafe, a gritty brew of roasted acorns, chicory, or sugar beets smelling like despair, and tasting like it was scraped from an old boot. You sip it, grimacing, because it's warm and that's the only kindness it offers. Bread, once the soul of your meals, is now a dense grey block stuffed with sawdust straw flour or potato starch. It's called bread, but your teeth beg to differ, grinding through it like it's helmet padding. Bite too hard and you might owe the dentist a favour. Butter's vanished too swapped for ersatz margarine, a greasy chalky paste that coats your mouth like regret. Meat's become a myth. Your tin might say meat product, but the label's suspiciously vague horse meat if you're lucky. Turnip filler if you're not. Sausages, once the pride of German cuisine, are now up to 40% plant material. Imagine sinking your teeth into a bratwurst and getting a mouthful of damp newspaper. That's the Reich's new recipe for morale. You open a can and the smell hits like a gas attack, a mix of oil and mystery that makes you question your life choices. You eat it anyway, because hunger doesn't negotiate. These ersatz rations aren't just bad, they're dangerous. In sub-zero winters, you're burning thousands of calories just to stay alive, but your food's barely enough to keep a sparrow flapping. Nutrients are scarce. Calories are a lie, and morale's crumbling faster than the biscuits in your pack. You get creative boiling shoe leather, or trading with locals for a potato, but it's not enough. An American Hershey bar, if you can barter for one, is worth more than a stack of this so-called bread. What started as a well-fed war machine is now running on cabbage water and patriotic slogans. Next, we'll head deeper into the Eastern Front, where rations didn't just shrink, they vanished, leaving you to fight hunger as fiercely as the enemy. You're a German soldier in 1943, crouched in a snowdrift on the Eastern Front, the wind howling like it's got a personal vendetta. Your fingers are numb, your boots are frozen, and your stomach's a hollow pit screaming for something, anything to fill it. To the Eastern Front, stretching from Berlin to Russia's icy heart, is where rations went to die. The sausages and rye of 1940 are a cruel memory, and now you're fighting a war against hunger as brutal as the one against the Soviets. Let's see what's left on your plate. Your meal, if you can call it that, is often just hot water with a few potato peels floating like sad ghosts. If you're lucky, you get a sliver of mouldy bread so hard it could double as a club. Meat. A rumour at best. Your tin of meat product might be beef, pork, or recycled hope, but the label's worn off and sniffing. It's a gamble. You thaw it over a fire-burning precious firewood not to warm your hands, but to make the can edible. In winter, you boil snow for water, heat tins on engine blocks, or shove them under your coat, praying they don't freeze solid. Eating snow sounds harmless until you realise it's stealing your body heat, inching you closer to a frostbitten grave. Rats are your rivals, now bold and fat-stealing scraps in midnight raids. Some units hunt them, roasting the critters over a fire desperation's new delicacy. Others barter with locals, trading buttons or socks for a boiled potato, but the locals are starving too. A spoonful of jam could spark a fistfight. A chocolate bar makes you a god. Supply lines are a myth collapsed under blizzards and Soviet ambushes. Field kitchens, once your lifeline, are stranded in frozen forest, their pots empty or filled with frost. You're not eating to live, you're eating to not die yet. Every mealtime is a grim ritual. You unwrap your tin, say a silent prayer, and hope it doesn't bite back. You joke with your squad, swearing you'll never eat another potato, but the laughter's hollow. The Eastern Front isn't just a battlefield. It's a cruel game of survival played one frozen spoonful at a time. You endure not because of what's in your mess kit, but because giving up isn't an option. Next, we'll cross to the Soviet side, where soldiers chewed on willpower and cabbage, proving resilience comes in many flavours. It's 1943 and you're a Soviet soldier knee-deep in the mud of Stalingrad, your rifle icy in your hands, your stomach growling louder than the shells overhead. The Red Army's approach to feeding you is as blunt as a bayonet. If it fills your gut and doesn't kill you on the spot, it's dinner. Soviet rations are less a meal and more a test of endurance, a grim mix of scarcity and stubbornness. Let's scrape the bottom of the pot and see what's fueling the fight against the Nazis. Your daily ration when it arrives is a lesson in minimalism. The star is black bread, a coarse heavy slab made from whatever grain the commissar could scrounge. Rye barley, or something that might have been legal last week. It's small enough to fit in your palm, gone in 2 bites if you're not careful, and you savour it like a sad lollipop licking crumbs to stretch it out. Then there's cabbage soup, the hero of Soviet cuisine. It's a watery broth with cabbage shredded, stuffed or fermented into submission, served in a tin cup that smells like last week's meal. If you're lucky, you get buckwheat porridge kashar, or a few boiled potatoes soft and grey like the sky above. Meat. It's on the menu in theory, but in reality it's as rare as a warm bunk. When it shows up, it's salted to the point of mummification, chewing it more like lifting weights than eating. You might lick the fat off an old tin chasing the ghost of flavour. Tea keeps you going, unsweetened, brewed from melted snow with a twig for character. It's not refreshing, it's survival sipped from a cup that's seen more battles than you have. Dried fish, when available, is a luxury, its salty tang a fleeting reminder that food can have tastes. These rations are supposed to arrive daily, but war laughs at schedules. Supply trucks get stuck in snow blown up or just never show. You're often left with half a bread ration, and a prayer underfed and overexerted marching into combat on fumes. Yet somehow you keep going, fueled by cabbage and sheer grit. The Soviet diet isn't about nutrition, it's about defiance, a refusal to break even when your stomach's screaming surrender. Next, we'll see how you and your comrades got creative, turning desperation into a culinary art form just to stay alive. You're a Red Army soldier outside Leningrad 1942, snow piling around your boots, your last piece of black bread sprouting a beard of mould. The supply truck hasn't come in a week, and your cabbage soup is just water with a leaf floating like a white flag. Hunger's your new commanding officer, but giving up isn't in the Soviet playbook. When rations run dry, you don't starve quietly. You get loud, creative, and a little feral. Let's dig into the battlefield improvisation that turned Soviet soldiers into culinary survivalists. Foraging is your first move. You scour the frozen countryside like a scavenger, with a rifle hunting for anything that won't fight back too hard. Berries, if you can find them, are a tart miracle. Tree bark, boiled grass, dandelion roots. Even flower bulbs, they're not food, they're defiance in edible form. One unit legend has it figured out how to roast shoe leather, not for taste, but because it was technically organic. You chew it grimacing and call it a meal. Bartering's next. A spare sock might get you a potato, a broken watch could score a spoonful of lard. Tobacco's currency, soap's gold, and a tin of meat. You could trade it for a love letter and a rifle cleaning. Then there's unauthorised logistics, the polite term for stealing. You raid abandoned German outpost heart-pounding as you pry open a crate to find Wehrmacht sausages. One veteran swore he wept, and salivated simultaneously, a moment of pure joy in the mud. Field kitchens, when they work, are masters of mystery cooking. Cooks toss in beets, onions, pickled vegetables from another decade, maybe a chunk of mystery meat. The result is a red, chewy broth that keeps you moving, if not smiling. You eat from a helmet or a shell, casing every bite a middle finger to starvation. Soviet soldiers didn't just eat, they performed survival theatre. You name your tin cups, sing songs about dried fish, and joke about your rations like they're old friends. Suffering's a badge of honour, proof you're tougher than the war itself. You trade food for silence, with German prisoners share a boiled egg like it's a holy relic and somehow keep marching. It's not calories fueling you, it's stubbornness seasoned with cabbage and camaraderie. Next, we'll cross to the British, where tea and hardtack kept soldiers going through a war of their own making. You're a British soldier in 1942, crouched in a North African trench, sand creeping into your boots and your soul. The sun's relentless, the war's louder, but your stomach's the real enemy, grumbling like a London bus stuck in traffic. Your rations arrive, and they're not so much food as a daily test of your stiff upper lip. British soldiers didn't eat, they endured, armed with tea hardtack and a grim optimism that somehow kept the Empire marching. Let's pop the lid on your mess tin and see what's on the menu. The holy trinity of British rations is tea hardtack, biscuits and bully beef. Tea is everything more than a drink. It's your anchor in a world gone mad. You brew it in a tin mug, a mess tin, even a helmet if you're desperate over a fire that's more smoke than flame. No milk, no sugar, just hot brown water that tastes like hope. You clutch it, ignoring the burn, and for a moment the war's just background noise. Hardtack biscuits are the opposite, dense, chalky, and built to outlast you. They're less food than construction material, doubling as plates, coasters, or dental challenges. Bite one wrong, and you're writing home about a cracked molar. Bully beef. The tinned corned beef is the star nobody asked for. It's salty, oily, and looks like it lost a fight with a meat grinder. You slice it, fry it, or stare at it until your appetite surrenders. Hot, it's bearable. Cold, it's a punishment you eat with a sigh. Then there's powdered eggs, which taste like someone described eggs to a chemist tinned jam that could seal a tank hatch, and oatmeal that's more glue than breakfast. A smattering of chocolate or dried fruit might show up locked in tins that demand a crowbar and a prayer to open. You wrestle them cursing while your mates bet on who'll win. Field kitchens, when they roll in, offer a flicker of relief stews thick with mystery stewed prunes, or if the gods are kind, a real egg. But tea's the constant brood through shellfire or mudslides. It's not just sustenance, it's defiance. A warm mug that says you're still British, still fighting. These rations kept you alive barely, but they were a war within the war fought with a spoon and a smirk. Stick with me as we explore what happened when these tins became too much, and British soldiers battled ration fatigue with sarcasm and sheer grit. It's 1943, and you're a British soldier in the Burmese jungle, sweat-soaked, swatting mosquitoes, the size of Spitfires. Your mess tin holds another serving of bully beef, looking sadder than a rainy day in Manchester. By now, you're not just fighting the Axis, you're wrestling ration fatigue, an invisible foe that creeps in with every tin of corned beef and every biscuit that mocks your teeth. The British supply system, held together by hope and paperwork, is fraying, and you're chewing through despair one bite at a time. Let's dive into the slog of keeping you fed across continents. Supply lines are your lifeline, but they're as reliable as a London fog. In Cairo, your rations might arrive warm, almost edible. In Burma, they're mouldy, half-eaten by ants and 2 weeks late. Tins rust, biscuits crumble, and jam turns to syrup in the jungle heat. You salute the delivery heat, what's left, and eat it anyway, because that's British resilience grumbling but getting on with it. Water's always boiled, not just for safety, but because boiling means tea. You'd risk a sniper's bullet to fetch a kettle, because a warm cup can turn a breakdown into a moment of muddy dignity. You get creative to survive. You rehydrate powdered milk for tea spread jam on hardtack with a bayonet, and season bully beef with sarcasm. One soldier legend says mixed corned beef with raisins and vitamin tablets for a stew that was morally questionable, but kept him marching. Tins are a curse and a blessing, eternal but needing Herculean strength to open. You debate tin designs like philosophers praising the rare keyroll ones and cursing the handleless devils. A fresh egg or a real vegetable sparks celebration or suspicion. 1. Tommy stared at a tomato for an hour, half expecting it to vanish like a mirage. Tea remains your saviour, brewed through chaos, a steaming mug of stubbornness in a world of crumbling supply chains. You grumble with dignity, swap digestion, horror stories, and keep calm because that's the deal. Ration fatigue didn't break you. It sharpened your wit, made you a master of making do. Next, we'll sail to the Japanese, where rice and suffering fueled a different kind of war. One where hunger was just part of the job. It's 1942, and you're a Japanese soldier trudging through the dense jungle of Guadalcanal, your uniform heavy with sweat, your boots sinking into mud that smells like decay. Hunger gnaws at you like an old friend, but you've been taught that suffering is noble, that starvation is just another duty to the emperor. The Imperial Japanese Army runs on endurance, and your rations are less a meal than a whisper of sustenance. Let's unpack your kit and see what's keeping you on your feet, barely in this brutal war. Your field ration is a study in simplicity, wrapped in wax paper, or tucked into a bento-style tin that looks orderly, almost elegant. The centerpiece is white rice plain, or mixed with barley, a cultural anchor that feels like home in a world of chaos. You get dried fish, salty and chewy, or pickled plums umeboshi, whose tartness jolts you awake. There's soy sauce concentrate to drizzle over the rice, maybe a few hard candies for a fleeting sweetness. On a good day, you might have miso paste or powdered green tea treasures you hoard like gold. It's compact, familiar, and utterly insufficient for the hell you're marching through. At the war's start, you carried multi-day rations neatly packed, meant to fuel disciplined soldiers. But in jungles like New Guinea or Burma, the reality hits hard. Humidity turns rice into mouldy sludge rats chew through your pack, and dried fish spoils faster than your hopes of a quick victory. Japan's logistics are a nightmare. Supply lines are bombed, blocked, or simply forgotten. You're often left with a handful of rice to split among your squad-rationed grain by grain. You cook it in a mess tin over a feeble fire, the smoke stinging your eyes, and eat it slowly, willing it to fill the void. This isn't just hunger, it's doctrine. You're trained to see hardship as honourable to fight on willpower when your stomach's empty. A teaspoon of tea can lift your spirit. A pinch of salt feels like a gift from the gods. But calories are low, and suffering is high. You march on not because your belly's full, but because your mind's forged in discipline. These rations aren't about feeding you, they're about testing you, proving you can fight with nothing but rice and resolve. Next, we'll dive deeper into the Pacific jungles where nature itself turned your meals into a cruel game of survival. You're a Japanese soldier in 1943 hacking through the jungle of New Guinea, where the air's so thick it feels like breathing soup. The jungle looks lush, a green paradise from afar, but up close it's a death trap, leeches, disease, and a hunger that claws at your insides. Your rice ration's gone mouldy. Your dried fish is dust, and the supply ship hasn't come in weeks. In the Pacific theatre, food isn't just scarce, it's a taunting enemy, and the jungle's not your ally. Let's wade into the chaos of keeping yourself fed in this leafy hell. Supply lines in the Pacific are a cruel joke. Tropical storms, naval blockades, and enemy ambushes turn every delivery into a miracle you don't expect. When rations don't arrive, you're cut off left to fend for yourself in a jungle that offers nothing but tricks. Plants that look edible might send you hallucinating, or worse. Animals are fast too cunning to catch. Insects. They're aggressive, biting back before you can bite them. Your rice spoils in hours, tins rust shut, and even a fire's hard to keep alive in the damp. One soldier wrote, "Everything's wet here, even my appetite." You forage out of desperation. Boiled roots or wild fruit, if you're lucky, taste like dirt, but keep you moving. Frogs or jungle fowl are a rare prize caught with trembling hands. On bad days you chew tree bark, sip water flavoured with despair, or boil shoe leather to quiet your stomach's screams. Some units stretch a handful of rice by boiling it 3 times, sipping the starchy water like it's soup. Others ferment scraps into a gluey porridge dubbed jungle glue, that's more survival than sustenance. The darkest rumours whisper of cannibalism, rare but real when starvation pushed men past humanity's edge. Disease stalks you as fiercely as hunger. Malaria, dysentery, and dengue fever thrive on your weakened body, turning every bite you scrounge into a gamble. You drop not from bullets, but from exhaustion, your body betraying you as the jungle watches indifferent. Yet you endure, trained to see suffering as strength, to fight on nothing but willpower and the ghost of a rice ball. The Pacific jungle didn't feed you, it challenged you, and every meal was a victory over nature's cruel indifference. Next, we'll explore how soldiers across fronts turned rations into miracles, cooking with bayonets and sheer defiance. You're a soldier in 1944, huddled in a foxhole, a jungle clearing, or a bombed-out barn, your mess tin, your only kitchen, your bayonet doubling as a chef's knife. War stripped you to the basics, but hunger sparks a strange kind of genius. Across every front of World War II, soldiers didn't just eat their rations, they wrestled them into submission, turning meagre scraps into meals through sheer ingenuity. Let's dive into the battlefield alchemy that made a can of Spam or a crumbling biscuit feel like a victory feast. In American foxholes, you and your buddies turn K-ration crackers into something resembling food. You crush those jaw-breaking biscuits, mix them with powdered eggs and coffee creamer, and fry the mess over a tiny fire. The result? A pancake that tastes like warm despair, but it's better than choking down another dry slab. You melt canned cheese into a gooey paste over beans, calling it trench fondue, and slice Spam thin, stacking it between biscuits for a sandwich so sad it deserves a medal. Even chewing gum gets a second life-sealing leaky canteens or bartered for a pal's extra cigarette. British soldiers armed with their eternal hardtack and jars of jam get equally creative. You smear jam on biscuits, smashing them together for a jam buddy sandwich that crumbles under your teeth but tastes like defiance. In North Africa, one squad mixes bully beef with dried fruit, dubbing it Desert Delight, a name more optimistic than the flavour. Another night you stir whatever's left, oatmeal prunes, mystery meat into a stew called stuff because nobody, not even the cook, knows what's in it. You eat it with a grin because it's warm and that's enough. On the Eastern Front, Soviet soldiers turn improvisation into an extreme sport. You boil cabbage in a helmet using an empty shell casing as a pot. One unit desperate roasts a stolen German sausage guarding it like a treasure, while 3 comrades fend off scavengers. Japanese soldiers with little to work with refri rice with pickled vegetables for makeshift onigiri-style cakes. You hoard dried seaweed to flavour water when there's nothing left, each sip a small rebellion against starvation. These aren't meals, they're miracles proof you can outsmart hunger with a bayonet and a spark of hope. Every front, every soldier turns rations into a canvas for survival. Your mess kit's your laboratory, your squad's your family, and every bite's a story of making do. These acts of wartime alchemy didn't just fill bellies, they built morale, turning not enough into "we'll get through this." Next, we'll linger on the lasting impact of these meals, where a bite of bully beef or a whiff of cabbage soup carried soldiers back to the war, long after the guns fell silent. It's years after the war, maybe 1955, and you're a veteran sitting at your kitchen table, a warm meal in front of you. But a bite of meat or a sip of soup pulls you back to a foxhole in France, a jungle in Burma, or a frozen trench in Stalingrad. For World War II, soldiers' rations weren't just food. They were the heartbeat of survival woven into memories of trauma, camaraderie, and stubborn hope. Let's unpack how those tins of Spam and cups of tea became more than meals. They became the taste of a war that never quite left you. A forkful of corned beef might transport you to a muddy ditch where bully beef was your only shield against hunger. You'd laugh with your mates joking that the tin owed you money for the effort it took to open it. A whiff of cabbage soup and you're back in the Soviet lines, sharing a palm-sized chunk of black bread rationing crumbs like they were gold. For American GIs, a bite of chocolate could summon the rare joy of a Hershey bar, a fleeting escape from the K-ration's grim parade of biscuits and sludge. These weren't just meals, they were moments anchors in a world where chaos ruled. Veterans carried these tastes like scars. Some swapped stories with dark humour like the British Tommy, who tried trading hardtack with locals only to be laughed out of the village. A Soviet soldier swore he couldn't touch bread for years, not because he hated it, but because it felt too sacred, each loaf a reminder of hunger's grip. Another GI claimed he smelled Spam every time it rained, the metallic tang of a tin haunting his dreams. Powdered eggs starred in nightmares less food than a cruel prank from the army's cooks. Every bite was a fight to stay human, to hold on to hope, when the world was screaming to give up. Care packages were lifelines arriving with chocolate-dried fruit or cookies tucked beside handwritten notes. You'd hoard them, share them, or stretch a single bite across days, each crumb a tether to home. A fresh apple meant you were near a farm, maybe peace. A hot stew from a field kitchen meant you weren't dying today. Even bad coffee boiled in a battered tin was proof someone cared enough to try. These memories didn't fade, they clung as vivid as the battles themselves, because in war eating wasn't just survival. It was a declaration you were still here, still fighting, still you. As we wrap up the ration saga, we'll close with a reflection on how these meals shaped resilience, proving soldiers could endure anything, even food, that fought back. Next, we'll shift gears to the Whiskey Rebellion, where attacks on liquor sparked a different kind of fight, one that tested a young nation's soul. You're back in the quiet of your own space, maybe with a fan humming softly, the chaos of World War II's battlefields fading like a distant radio signal. We've trudged through foxholes, jungles, and frozen trenches, chasing the story of what soldiers ate to survive. From American K rations to Japanese rice balls, from Soviet cabbage soup to German ersatz misery, these weren't just meals, they were lifelines stitching together resilience, despair, and the stubborn human will to keep going. Let's pause here with a warm drink in hand and reflect on what those tins and biscuits taught us. Every soldier, whether shivering in Stalingrad or sweating in Guadalcanal, faced the same truth: you had to eat, even if the food fought back. A can of Spam wasn't just meat. It was a moment of camaraderie shared with a joke or a curse. A cup of tea brewed in a British helmet was more than a drink, it was defiance, a refusal to let war strip you bare. These rations, grim as they were, fueled not just bodies but spirits. They were proof that humans can endure the unendurable, finding joy in a rare chocolate bar or hope in a spoonful of watery soup. This journey's shown us the grit behind the glory. Forget Hollywood's polished war stories, real survival was in the clink of a mess tin, the barter of a cigarette for a cracker, the smell of a field kitchen cutting through gunpowder. Soldiers didn't just fight enemies, they fought hunger, boredom, and the creeping dread of another day. Yet they laughed, they improvised, they shared. That's the real victory, not borders redrawn, but humanity held tight in the face of hell. So next time you grab a snack, think of those men cooking with bayonets and willpower, proving every bite was a battle won. We're closing this chapter, but the stories don't end. If you've enjoyed this dive into history, drop a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from, maybe with a nod to your own comfort food. Next, we'll shift to a different kind of fight, one sparked not by bullets, but by barrels of whiskey in a young America. Stay with me as we uncork the Whiskey Rebellion, a tale of tax defiance and a nation finding its footing. Picture yourself in 1791 standing on a muddy frontier road in western Pennsylvania. The air sharp with pine and the tang of wood smoke. You're a farmer, your hands rough from ploughing fields, your pockets light, but for a jug of homemade whiskey currency as good as gold out here. The young United States is barely a nation, its constitution still wet with ink when a new tax on distilled spirits lands like a punch from Philadelphia's fancy elites. Tonight, we're diving into the Whiskey Rebellion, a rowdy moonshine-fueled uprising that tested America's soul. So dim the lights settle in, and let's sip this story one fiery dram at a time. If you're enjoying this tale, give a quick like, subscribe. If you're hooked, and drop a comment. Where are you and what's the time? It's wild to think we're sharing this history across the globe. Now back to the frontier. The Revolutionary War's over, but America's broke, buried in debt from fighting the British. Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton, all powdered wig and big ideas, cooks up a planned tax whiskey to fill the coffers. To city folks, it's just a sin tax booze, who cares? But out west, it's a betrayal, a slap from a government that feels as distant as King George ever did. Whiskey isn't just a drink here, it's life. You distill your surplus grain into liquor because it's easier to haul over mountain trails than sacks of corn. It doesn't spoil, it's profitable, and you trade it for nails cloth or a doctor's visit. Barter's the heartbeat of the frontier, and whiskey's its blood. So when federal taxmen come knocking demanding cash you don't have, it's not just about money, it's about survival. Hamilton's tax hits small distillers, hardest favouring big producers who can pay a flat fee while you're nickeled and dimed per gallon. It smells like class warfare, and you're not having it. At first, resistance is small grumbles in taverns, a tax collector chased off with a pitchfork. But those grumbles grow into something fiercer, meetings, militias, and a defiance that echoes the revolution you fought for. This isn't just about whiskey, it's about power, freedom, and whether this new nation will listen to its people or crush them. Stick with me as we explore how whiskey became the frontier's currency, and why taxing it lit a fuse that nearly blew America apart. You're a farmer in 1791, standing in your western Pennsylvania barn, the air thick with the sweet, sharp scent of fermenting grain. Your fields yielded a decent crop, but getting it to market over the Allegheny Mountains is a nightmare. Roads or mud rivers are fickle, and cash is a myth. So you've turned your corn into whiskey, a liquid gold that's easier to carry, doesn't rot, and buys you what you need. Out here, whiskey isn't just a drink, it's money, and the new federal tax on it feels like a thief picking your pocket. Let's pour into why whiskey ruled the frontier and how taxing it sparked a rebellion. Out on the edge of America, where towns are just clusters of cabins, the economy runs on barter. You trade a jug of whiskey for a sack of nails, a bolt of cloth, or a blacksmith's time. It's practical. A gallon of liquor is worth more than the grain it came from, and it doesn't spoil like apples or wheat. You can sling a cask over a mule and trek to a trading post, swapping it for tools or a doctor's visit. Whiskey's your savings account, your paycheck, and your ticket to survival, in a land where coins are as rare as a quiet night. This isn't just economics, it's culture. After a long day breaking soil or fending off wolves, you share a dram with neighbours, the burn in your throat sealing bonds tighter than any contract. Taverns are the frontier's banks where whiskey flows like trust, traded for gossip debts or a warm bed. You fought in the Revolution maybe for liberty, and a fair shake, and now this whiskey is your stake in that dream, a piece of independence you can taste. Then comes Hamilton's tax, a federal grab that demands cash you don't have for every gallon you distill. Big distilleries back east can pay a flat fee, but you with your small still and a few barrels get taxed per drop. It's not just unfair, it's a betrayal. You see Philadelphia's elites safe in their mansions, squeezing the frontier to pay for a war you already bled for. Whiskey's your lifeline, and taxing it feels like taxing your freedom. The anger simmers, ready to boil over as you and your neighbours start whispering about resistance. Next, we'll see how those whispers turned into shouts, with tax collectors running for cover and the frontier ready to fight back. It's 1792, and you're in a smoky tavern in western Pennsylvania, the clink of whiskey jugs mixing with the growl of angry voices. The federal whiskey tax has landed like a spark in dry grass, and your neighbours, farmers, distillers, veterans are done grumbling. You're not just mad about money. You're mad about power, about a government hundreds of miles away treating you like a serf. Resistance is brewing, and it's starting small but fierce, with tax collectors dodging pitchforks and the frontier drawing a line in the dirt. Let's step into the early days of the Whiskey Rebellion, where defiance took root. At first it's petty but pointed. A taxman rides up to your still ledger in hand, demanding cash for every gallon you've made. You don't have cash, you've got whiskey, maybe a hog or two, but coins. They're as mythical as unicorns out here, so you tell him to shove off maybe with a glare or a wave of your musket. He leaves, but not before you burn his tax papers in the yard, the flames a quiet cheer for liberty. Across the county, others do the same. Inspectors are threatened, their horses spooked, their pride bruised. It's not rebellion yet, just a warning, stay out of our hills. But the tax keeps coming, and so does the anger. You meet in barns and taverns, passing a jug as you curse Hamilton and his powdered Whig schemes. These aren't just drunken rants. They're organised with whispers of revolution in the air. You're veterans, many of you, who fought the British for a fairer world, and this tax feels like tyranny in a new suit. The tax structure stings worst. Big Eastern distilleries pay less per gallon, while you scraping by pay more. It's not just a tax, it's a rigged game, and you're losing. Things turn uglier. A tax collector's house gets a midnight visit, windows smashed, walls tarred. Another's chased out of town, his fancy coat feathers and all. You hear stories of revenue men stripped, tied to trees, their dignity left in the mud. It's frontier justice, raw and reckless, fueled by moonshine and memory. You're not criminals, you tell yourself you're patriots standing up to a government that's forgotten you. But Philadelphia's watching, and President Washington's starting to frown. Next we'll see how this resistance hardened into rebellion with militias forming, and the frontier ready to draw blood. It's 1793, and you're in a Pennsylvania tavern, the air thick with whiskey fumes and fury or musket leaning against the wall like an old friend. The whiskey tax has turned your frontier life into a battleground, and what started as grumbles and pranks is now a full-blown rebellion. You're not just a farmer anymore, you're part of a movement meeting in secret, passing jugs and plans with equal care. The western counties are aflame with defiance, and it's getting organised loud and dangerous. Let's step into the heart of the Whiskey Rebellion, where pitchforks turn to muskets, and the frontier dares to challenge a nation. Your neighbours aren't just dodging taxes, they're forming militias, swearing oaths by candlelight in cabins, where whiskey barrels stand proud. These aren't drunken rants. They're coordinated with resolutions condemning the tax as tyranny. Some folks refuse to deal with anyone who pays it, turning your community into a mix of protest and frontier mafia. You've seen tax collectors ambush their ledgers, burned their pride whipped raw. One man's paraded through town, a sign reading "Coward" slung around his neck, his face redder than the sunset. It's like the Boston Tea Party, but with worse hygiene and more moonshine. The violence escalates, and it's not just talk. Tax sympathisers are tarred and feathered, their homes torched, while neighbours cheer. Federal marshals trying to serve court summons are met with gunfire, or the cold stare of a local sheriff who's quietly on your side. The region's slipping into lawlessness, a place where the law feels like an intruder. You're not just fighting for whiskey, you're fighting for your way of life, for the liberty you bled for in the Revolution. You call yourselves patriots, standing against a government that's starting to look like the one you overthrew. In Philadelphia, the mood's shifting. President Washington, usually steady as a rock, is gritting his teeth, false ones and all. The rebellion's not just a local tantrum, it's a test of the Constitution itself. If you can scare off taxmen and defy Congress, what's the point of a federal government? You hear whispers of negotiations, but they feel like offering tea at a bar fight. The frontier's drawing a line, and you're on one side, musket in hand, wondering how far this will go. Next we'll see how Washington responds, weighing peace against power, as the young nation braces for a showdown. It's 1794, and you're a frontier farmer in western Pennsylvania. Your heart pounding as rumours swirl, President George Washington himself is coming for you. The whiskey tax rebellion has pushed the young United States to a breaking point with your militias, and moonshine-fueled defiance threatening the Constitution's fragile authority. You thought you were standing up for liberty, but now the man who led the revolution is weighing his options, and he's not amused. Let's ride into Washington's response, where a president's patience meets a nation's test. You've pushed hard, tax collectors run out of town, their papers ashes their pride in tatters. But Philadelphia's not ignoring you anymore. Washington, calm as ever, tries diplomacy, first sending commissioners to negotiate with your rebel leaders. It's a nice gesture, but it lands like a sermon in a saloon. Your meetings in taverns and barns aren't about compromise, they're about defiance, with some even whispering about secession, a new nation free from Eastern elites. You see yourself as a patriot, not a criminal, fighting a tax that chokes your livelihood. Alexander Hamilton. Washington's hawkish Treasury Secretary isn't having it. He's in the president's ear, his voice sharp as his quill. Let these whiskey rebels stomp on the Constitution. After all we fought for, Hamilton sees your uprising as a direct challenge to federal power, a chance to prove the government has teeth. Washington, though, hesitates. He's no tyrant, and he knows the frontier's full of men who fought beside him for liberty. But when negotiations fail, when your militias keep arming and your resolutions grow bolder, he makes a call that shakes the nation. Washington decides to raise an army over 12,000 troops, bigger than the force he led at Trenton. It's not just a show, it's a statement. The federal government will enforce its laws no matter how far west you hide. Hamilton's thrilled, practically strutting in his boots, ready to march. Washington, more reluctant, knows the stakes. If he can't quell this rebellion, the United States might unravel its states splintering like dry kindling. For the first time, a sitting president prepares to lead troops against his own people, and you're left wondering if your whiskey's worth a war. Next, we'll march with that army as Washington rides west to face a rebellion that's about to meet its match. It's 1794, and you're a farmer in western Pennsylvania, your heart sinking as dust clouds rise on the horizon. Word spread like wildfire. George Washington, the hero of the Revolution, is leading your army straight toward your whiskey-soaked rebellion. The tax on your stills has pushed you to defiance. But now you're facing over 12,000 troops, a force bigger than the one that beat the British. You thought you were fighting for liberty, but Washington's coming to remind you who's in charge. Let's march with that army and see how a nation flexes its newborn muscle. Picture the scene: Washington astride a horse, his face stern under a tricorn hat, leading a federal force through the Allegheny Mountains. It's not just soldiers, militias from Maryland, New Jersey, Virginia, and even Pennsylvania, some voluntold to join. Alexander Hamilton's riding along, his eyes gleaming like he's scripted this drama himself, eager to show the frontier the Constitution's got teeth. This isn't a war against foreigners, it's a march against Americans, farmers like you, armed with pitchforks and moonshine dreams. It's the largest federal force ever assembled, and it's headed your way. You and your neighbours talked big militias, resolutions, even secession, but this is different. Washington's not just a president. He's a legend, the man who birthed the nation you're now defying. His presence alone is a message rebellion won't be met with pamphlets, but with bayonets. You remember fighting beside men like him, muskets blazing for freedom, and now he's riding west to crush your stand over whiskey. It's surreal, like a father turning on his own kin, and it's shaking your resolve. The army's march is a spectacle, cutting through forests and valleys, their boots pounding a warning into the earth. You hear rumours of their approach in every tavern, every barn where you once plotted defiance. Some of your comrades are still shouting liberty, but others are quieter now, eyeing their stills and wondering if this fight's worth the cost. Washington's gamble is bold. If he fails, the Constitution could crumble. But if he succeeds, he'll prove the federal government's no pushover. Next, we'll see what happens when this army reaches rebel territory, and your rebellion faces its moment of truth. You're in western Pennsylvania, late 1794, hiding in your barn as the federal army's boots echo closer. George Washington's force, 12,000 strong, has marched into your rebel heartland, ready to squash the Whiskey Rebellion over a tax you swore you'd never pay. Your militia's been drilling, your still's been bubbling, and you've been shouting about liberty, but now the reality hits like a cold splash of creek water. The rebellion you stoked is about to fizzle, and you're left wondering where it all went wrong. Let's watch this uprising collapse under the weight of a president's resolve. As Washington's army approaches, your bravado starts to crack. Those tavern boasts about fighting the feds sound hollow when you see the glint of bayonets and hear the tramp of disciplined troops. The ringleaders who fired you up with whiskey and talk of revolution, they're vanishing, slipping into the woods or claiming they've got chores to do. You and your neighbours, once ready to stand like Minutemen, are now muttering excuses, your muskets feeling heavier than your cause. Washington's presence, mythic unyielding, does more damage than any cannon could. There's no grand battle, no Alamo-style showdown. The rebellion melts like frost in the sun. Some rebels flee, others take the I-know-nothing defense blending back into their farms. The army rounds up a few stragglers, but it's anticlimactic. Hundreds of miles march to face a ghost of defiance. You watch from your window as soldiers camp nearby, their fires brighter than your hopes. Washington's message is clear. The federal government's no joke, and your whiskey tax, like it or not, is law. You're left with a bitter taste not of liquor but of defeat. Yet even in collapse, something lingers. You're angry, sure, but you're also awake to a government that can crush dissent. Awake to a fight you didn't quite win but didn't entirely lose. Washington's army heads home, leaving you to your stills and your grudges. The rebellion's over, but the story's not. Next, we'll dive into the aftermath, arrest trials, and Washington's surprising mercy as the young nation grapples with what it means to enforce its laws. It's 1794 and you're a frontier farmer in western Pennsylvania. Your rebellion against the whiskey tax crushed under the weight of George Washington's army. The militias are gone, scattered like leaves in a storm, and the feds are rounding up the stragglers. Your barn's quiet now, but the air's heavy with the threat of justice federal style. You're wondering who'll pay for the torched tax papers and tarred collectors. Let's step into the aftermath of the Whiskey Rebellion, where trials test the young nation's spine, and Washington's mercy surprises everyone. The Federal Army, 12,000 strong, didn't fire a shot, but they've got prisoners, about 20 rebels, mostly small-time farmers caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The big talkers, the ones who rallied militias in taverns, have slipped into the wilderness, leaving you and your neighbours to face the music. These men are hauled to Philadelphia, the nation's capital, to stand trial for treason, a word that hangs heavy like a noose. You're nervous, hearing whispers of gallows, but the trials aren't the spectacle Alexander Hamilton hoped for. Evidence is shaky, witnesses scarce, and the jury made up of Pennsylvanians isn't eager to hang their own. Only 2 men are convicted, and even that feels like a stretch. They're not warlords, just farmers who got swept up in the whiskey-fueled fury. You expect Hamilton, ever the hawk, to push for blood, but Washington, the old general, takes a different path. He pardons both men, a move that shocks the firebrands and calms the frontier. It's not weakness, it's strategy. Washington knows the rebellion's already dead, and crushing these men would only spark new flames. You breathe easier, realising the government's showing teeth but not claws. It'll enforce the law, but it won't play tyrant. This mercy is as powerful as the army's march. Washington's proving the United States can flex its muscle without breaking its people. You're back at your still the tax still stinging, but there's a grudging respect for a leader who balances justice with compassion. Hamilton grumbles, wanting heads to roll, but the frontier's watching, learning that the Constitution's real, even if it stinks of Eastern elites. Next, we'll explore the political ripples, as this rebellion fuels a divide that shapes America's future. You're in western Pennsylvania, 1795, the Whiskey Rebellion, a fading ember, but its heat still lingers in every tavern and barn. Your still's back in business, bubbling quietly, but the fight over the whiskey tax has left a mark deeper than any federal bootprint. It's not just about liquor anymore, it's about power class and 2 visions of what America should be. The rebellion's collapse didn't end the argument. It lit a fuse for a political divide that's splitting the young nation. Let's wade into the fallout, where ideas clash louder than muskets. On one side, there's Alexander Hamilton and his Federalist lovers of order commerce, and a strong central government. To them, your rebellion was proof the frontier needs a firm hand. Untamed farmers with stills can't be trusted to play nice. They see Washington's march as a triumph, a flex of federal muscle that keeps the Constitution standing. But you out here in the hills feel differently. The tax-favouring big distillers felt like a betrayal, a reminder that Philadelphia's elites don't know your life. You're not alone. Thomas Jefferson and his Republicans, champions of the yeoman farmer, are listening. Jefferson, Washington's vice president, calls the federal response a monarchical adventure, a jab that stings. He sees the 12,000 troops as overkill, stomping on honest folks who just wanted a fair shake. You and your neighbours, many of you Revolutionary War veterans, agree it's not about law-breaking. It's about a government that's forgotten the little guy. The rebellion's failure galvanizes support for Jefferson's cause. Out west, where distrust of federal power ferments, like your whiskey, his Republican Party gains traction. You're not just farmers now, you're voters angry and ready to be heard. This isn't just a local spat, it's the birth of America's first political parties, sharpening the divide between centralized power and local control. The rebellion failed to stop the tax, but it succeeded in waking up the frontier's voice. You feel the sting of defeat, but also a spark of something bigger, a sense that your fight, however small, is shaping the nation's soul. Next, we'll wrap up with the rebellion's legacy, where whiskey becomes a symbol of defiance, and America learns what it means to govern its